After it became the most recognizable name in the home entertainment industry that an entire generation would ever know, Blockbuster was turning Friday nights into a ritual that millions of families across America would plan their entire weekend around. From starting in the oil fields of Texas to building a retail empire so large that it employed more people than the population of a small city, Blockbuster was celebrated by an entire industry and adored by the suburbs that built it. So how did a company that controlled 40% of the American video rental market and served 65 million registered customers end up filing for bankruptcy with more than $1 billion in debt? And what decisions, made by the people in charge, sealed its fate long before anyone realized the ending had already been written? The Data Man from Texas. The story of Blockbuster does not begin in a movie theater or a Hollywood boardroom. It begins in the oil fields of Texas with a man who wrote software for petroleum companies and whose entire industry collapsed beneath him before he ever rented a single movie to anyone. His name was David Cook, and in 1978, he founded a company called Cook Data Services, which built specialized computer programs and database management systems for the regional oil and gas industry. For several years, the business was stable and productive. Then the Texas oil market went into a severe economic decline in the early 1980s, and Cook found himself with a sophisticated set of technical skills and almost no one left who needed them. It was his wife, Sandy Cook, who pointed him toward the answer. She had spent months quietly researching the home entertainment sector, which was growing rapidly and chaotically, and she recognized something that most people around her had not yet seen clearly. The video rental industry was enormous in its potential and deeply broken in its execution, and the specific thing that was breaking it was the very thing her husband had spent years learning how to fix: the problem with Friday nights. In the mid-1980s, the video rental market was controlled almost entirely by small, independent stores, the kind of places that felt more like cluttered backrooms than actual retail destinations. The reason these stores stayed small and disorganized had almost nothing to do with a lack of demand. It had to do with price. Movie studios charged stores approximately $70 for a single physical videotape, which meant that most store owners could only afford to stock a very limited number of copies of any title. To protect that expensive inventory from theft, the stores kept the actual tapes behind the counter, hidden from customers, who were left to flip through empty cardboard boxes on the shelves and then wait while a clerk disappeared into a back room to find the physical tape they had requested. The whole process was slow and unreliable, and on a busy Friday evening, the tape a family had driven across town to rent was frequently already gone. Cook recognized that this was not a retail problem, it was a data problem, and he knew exactly how to solve it. He sold his petroleum software business, walked away from the oil industry entirely, and used the money he received to open a video rental store that operated on a completely different set of principles than anything the market had seen before. He chose his own corporate name, Blockbuster Video Inc., after an earlier franchise deal fell apart over something as simple as a disagreement about the color of a storefront. The franchise had refused to let him paint his store in his preferred blue and yellow. He decided he would rather build his own. The store that changed everything. On October 19, 1985, the first Blockbuster opened in Dallas, Texas, and the difference between it and every other video store in the country was immediately visible the moment a customer walked through the door. Instead of empty boxes and hidden tapes, the movies were displayed directly on open shelves, organized and browsable, the way books are arranged in a library or a bookstore. Customers could walk the aisles themselves, pull a tape from the shelf, read the back, put it down, and keep looking until they found something they wanted. The experience of choosing a movie, which had previously felt like a transaction conducted through a window by a clerk, became something personal and exploratory and unhurried. Behind this experience was the database system that Cook had built from his years in the software industry. It tracked exactly what was in stock, what had been rented, and what each neighborhood's customers were most likely to want. which allowed Blockbuster to tailor the inventory of each store to the specific preferences of the people who lived nearby. The checkout process, which had once involved clerks searching through back rooms' inventory by hand, was fast and automated and nearly error-free. And there was one more detail about the first Blockbuster store that would turn out to matter more than almost anything else. Nailed to a wall somewhere in the history of every elite long-range shooter in basketball is a milk crate that made the rim smaller and the margin for error almost impossibly thin. Blockbuster had its own version of that training tool, though you would never have guessed it from looking at it. It was a milk crate nailed to a telephone pole in an Oakland grandmother's front yard, but in Blockbuster's case, the equivalent was simpler and stranger. Before there were 8,000 tapes on open shelves, there was a milk crate without a backboard, an opening narrower than a regulation rim, and a young shooter who had to arc the ball perfectly every single time just to make it go through. The first Blockbuster store stocked 8,000 VHS tapes and 2,000 beta tapes, a number so large compared to what any competitor was carrying that it felt less like a video rental store and more like a declaration of war against the entire industry. To support the expansion of this idea beyond a single Dallas location, Cook built a $6 million centralized distribution warehouse in Garland, Texas, which packaged and shipped pre-configured sets of inventory to new stores so that they could open almost fully stocked and operational from day one. By the summer of 1986, he had expanded to 3 additional locations and renamed the company Blockbuster Entertainment Corporation. When he attempted to raise money by selling shares of the company to the public, a financial newspaper columnist published a critical article questioning whether an oil software engineer had any business running a retail chain. And the fear that article planted in potential investors was enough to cancel the public offering entirely. Cook was left with an ambitious idea: a small cluster of stores, and not enough money to take it where he believed it could go. The man who saw a McDonald's. The man who arrived with the money was named H. Wayne Huizenga, and he had spent most of his professional life doing exactly one thing, which was finding industries that were broken up into too many small competing pieces and putting them back together under a single powerful name. His grandfather had built a horse and wagon trash collection service in Chicago in 1894. Huizenga had taken that family instinct for consolidation, dropped out of college to build his own hauling service in Florida, merged it with other operators, and eventually created Waste Management Inc., the largest trash hauling company in the world, executing 90 corporate acquisitions in a single 9-month stretch by using his own company's stock as currency instead of cash. When 2 of his business partners, John Melk and Don Flynn, brought him to see what Cook had built in Dallas, Huizenga walked into the store expecting to find something that reminded him of the dim, disorganized adult entertainment shops that had given the video rental industry its reputation for seediness. What he found instead was bright lighting, clean shelves, and a database-driven system of stock control that he immediately recognized as something else entirely. He did not see a video store, he saw a McDonald's. He saw a single, highly standardized product that could be replicated in exactly the same form in any suburb in America, franchised and expanded and consolidated until it dominated the entire country the way a fast food chain dominates a highway exit. In February 1987, Huizenga and his partners acquired a controlling 60% stake in Blockbuster for $18.5 million, and almost immediately, the 2 visions of what this company should become came into conflict with each other. Cook wanted to grow through franchising, selling the proprietary software and the Blockbuster brand name to local operators who would run their own stores. Huizenga wanted to own the stores directly, controlling the cash flow and the operations absolutely, rather than sharing them with independent franchisees. There was no middle ground between these 2 positions, and by April of 1987, David Cook had resigned, walking away from the company he had built and leaving Wayne Huizenga in complete control of what it would become next. The Empire. What it became next was something the American retail landscape had never quite seen before. Huizenga recruited Luigi Salvineschi, the former real estate manager for McDonald's and KFC, and put him to work applying the same location algorithms that fast food chains used to identify the highest traffic suburban corners in the country. Wherever the data said families drove past in the largest numbers on Friday evenings, that was where the next Blockbuster went. By 1988, the chain had opened its 400th store. By 1989, it was operating more than 1,000 locations and had begun expanding into international markets. Huizenga also made a decision about what kind of company Blockbuster would be in the eyes of the families it was trying to reach. He instituted a strict ban on adult titles, positioning every Blockbuster store as a place that parents could bring their children without hesitation or embarrassment. The stores were clean and bright and organized, and the brand extended itself into sports sponsorships and community partnerships with a deliberateness that made the name feel less like a store and more like a neighborhood institution. The machine that Huizenga built during those years was one of the most effective retail expansion engines the entertainment industry had ever produced. By the early 1990s, the company was using its highly valued stock to acquire and absorb its regional competitors one by one, buying chains with names like Eros Video and Ritz and Major Video and folding them into the blue and yellow empire until Blockbuster had no meaningful rival left anywhere in the country. But even as the stores were filling with customers and the revenues were climbing, the man who had built the machine had begun to quietly wonder whether the machine had a ceiling. By 1994, Huizenga had come to believe that technologies like satellite television and fiber optic video delivery were going to threaten the physical store model sooner than most people around him were willing to admit. He did not wait to find out whether he was right. He negotiated the sale of Blockbuster Entertainment Corporation to Summer Redstone's media company Viacom for $8.4 billion, and he walked away from the empire he had spent 7 years building before the first crack appeared in its foundation. The people who stayed behind were not so lucky. The cash cow. Viacom had not purchased Blockbuster because it loved the video rental business. It had purchased Blockbuster because Blockbuster generated enormous predictable amounts of cash, and Viacom needed that cash to pay down the massive debt it had taken on to acquire Paramount Pictures. Within this period, Blockbuster produced millions of dollars in free cash flow every single year, and almost none of that money was put back into the company. It was sent directly to Viacom to service debt and fund film productions at the exact moment that a young company called Netflix, founded in 1997, was using its own cash to build distribution centers, engineer recommendation software, and establish itself quietly in the online subscription market. Viacom's first leadership appointment at Blockbuster was a former Walmart executive named Bill Fields, who attempted to transform video rental stores into broad entertainment destinations by filling the shelves with toys, clothing, music, books, and consumer electronics. The stores became cluttered and confusing. The core video inventory suffered, and customers who had come in looking for a movie found themselves navigating a store that no longer seemed to know what it was. Fields resigned within a year, leaving the company in a condition of genuine operational distress. In May 1997, Summer Redstone met a turnaround executive named John Antioco at a hotel in Beverly Hills and offered him the job of saving what Viacom had allowed to deteriorate. Antioco accepted, cleared the stores of everything that did not belong there, and introduced a business model innovation called revenue sharing that transformed the economics of the entire home video industry. Instead of paying $65 per tape and stocking only a few copies of each title, Blockbuster negotiated deeply reduced tape prices from the Hollywood studios and shared a portion of every rental with them in return. The shelves filled up with multiple copies of every new release. The out-of-stock problem that had frustrated customers for years disappeared almost overnight, and Blockbuster entered the new millennium looking like a company that had found its footing again. The year that everything changed. Then came the year 2000, and two decisions would define everything that came after. In September of that year, 3 people from a small, struggling online DVD by mail company flew to Dallas to ask Blockbuster to buy them out for $50 million. The company was Netflix, and at the time, It had 300,000 subscribers and was losing money at a pace that made its survival genuinely uncertain. Reed Hastings and his co-founders sat across the table from John Antioco and his team and made their pitch, describing a future where Blockbuster would manage the online digital business and Netflix would handle the mail order operation. One person in the room later recalled noticing a slight smile across Antioco's face during the presentation, the kind of expression that appears on a person who is trying not to laugh. Blockbuster declined the offer, and Reed Hastings flew home with $50 million worth of motivation to make sure the company that had laughed at him would eventually have reasons to regret it. 2 months earlier, while preparing to dismiss Netflix, Blockbuster had signed a 20-year exclusive partnership with a division of Enron Corporation called Enron Broadband Services, which promised to deliver streaming video directly to homes over a high-speed fiber optic network. The partnership collapsed within months when it became clear that the technology did not work, that the internet connections available to most households could not carry high-definition video, and that Hollywood studios were unwilling to license their films for digital distribution. What nobody at Blockbuster knew at the time was that Enron's finance team had used the partnership to book over $100 million in fictional profits on their financial statements, a fraud that would eventually help trigger one of the largest corporate scandals in American history. In October 2004, Viacom spun Blockbuster off as an independent company, and the way it structured that separation left Blockbuster carrying $905 million in new debt from the moment it became independent, the proceeds of which were paid directly to Viacom's shareholders as a parting gift. Blockbuster entered its new life as a freestanding company already in the kind of debt that makes every subsequent decision harder than it should be, at the exact moment that Netflix was accelerating and a new competitor called Redbox was beginning to place low-cost rental kiosks in grocery stores and gas stations across the country. The last fight. John Antioco responded with 2 bold moves. He eliminated late fees entirely, the charges that had long been Blockbuster's most reliable source of customer resentment and had historically accounted for nearly 17% of the company's total revenue. And he launched a hybrid service called Total Access, which allowed online subscribers to return their mailed DVDs directly to any Blockbuster store and walk out with a free replacement on the spot. He combined the convenience of mail order with the immediacy of physical retail in a way that Netflix, with no stores of its own, was structurally unable to match. Total Access grew so quickly and pulled so many subscribers away from Netflix that Netflix's leadership began describing it internally as an existential threat. But Total Access was losing $2 on every free in-store exchange, and those losses attracted the attention of an activist investor named Carl Icahn, who had been quietly accumulating Blockbuster stock and who believed that Antioco's digital ambitions were destroying the company's value rather than protecting it. Icahn launched a public campaign against Antioco's compensation and his strategy, won a seat on the board of directors, and spent the next 2 years fighting a war of internal politics that consumed the attention of Blockbuster's leadership at the precise moment when the competitive landscape outside the boardroom required their complete and undivided focus. In early 2007, Antioco agreed to step down. The man who replaced him was James Keyes, the former CEO of 7-Eleven, who arrived with a strong belief in the fundamentals of physical retail and a skepticism about the digital future that would prove to be costly. Keyes raised the prices on the online subscription packages, eliminated the free in-store exchange that had made Total Access so powerful, and reintroduced the late fees that the previous administration had spent millions of dollars and enormous political capital to remove. The online subscriber base that Antioco had built evaporated within months. The physical stores that Keyes was trying to protect were bleeding customers to Redbox kiosks that charged $1 a night and required no memberships at all. The final collapse. When the global financial crisis arrived in September 2008, it found Blockbuster carrying nearly $1 billion in debts and no reliable way to refinance it in markets that had frozen completely. The Hollywood studios, nervous about whether Blockbuster could pay its bills, began demanding cash payment up front before shipping any new titles. They pulled $300 million of working capital out of the company in a matter of weeks, leaving the shelves of thousands of stores without the new releases that were the entire reason customers came through the door. On September 23, 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy protection in a federal court in New York, listing $1 billion in assets against $1.46 billion in debt. The following year, Dish Network purchased what remained of the company for $320 million and slowly closed the last of the corporate locations, shuttering the final stores in November 2013, except for one. In Bend, Oregon, a single franchise location that had originally opened in 1992 as a store called Pacific Video still operates today under the blue and yellow sign, run by a woman named Sandy Harding, who has managed the location since 2004. People fly in from other countries to visit it. They buy officially licensed merchandise and take photographs in front of the sign and stand in the aisles where something that once felt permanent used to live. The store has a section of movie memorabilia that includes a leather robe worn by Russell Crowe in a film, which sits on display in a building that corporate America left behind and a small community decided was worth keeping. If this story made you think about something differently, let us know in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe so you never miss what we put out next.